I am Elena Moore, and I am 27 years old. In just a few weeks, I am supposed to be getting married. The date is circled on the calendar, the venue is booked, the dress hangs quietly in a garment bag in the corner of our bedroom. Yet instead of feeling only joy, I find myself sitting alone at my kitchen table late at night, surrounded by a scattered sea of wedding invitations, each envelope carrying memories, expectations, and unspoken truths. My fingers tremble slightly as I scan the guest list again, double-checking names, making sure I haven't forgotten anyone important. There is one name I have very deliberately left out, and that decision has opened old wounds I thought had healed. Before you continue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this reach people who are silently carrying pain caused by family betrayal, and your support helps these stories find those who need them most. I already know how this sounds. People always have opinions when it comes to weddings and family. She's your stepmother. It's your big day, why cause drama? You'll regret it if she's not there. But what people don't understand is that not all family wounds are visible. Some are quiet. Some are built over years of neglect, manipulation, and emotional cruelty. Some are created when a child learns very early that love in one home is conditional, and silence is the price of survival. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old. I was too young to understand legal documents or broken promises, but I understood change. I understood the way my father stopped sleeping in the house. I understood the tension in the air and the way my mother's voice cracked when she told me everything would be okay. They sat me down together one afternoon and explained that they were separating, but that they both loved me very much. I would live with both of them, switching homes every 2 weeks. At that age, I thought it sounded fair. I didn't want to choose between them. I loved them both. And for a while, that arrangement actually worked. When I stayed with my father, Richard, life felt adventurous. He ran a small logistics company and controlled his own schedule. On his weekends with me, we'd pack snacks into the car and take spontaneous road trips. We explored nearby cities, stayed in modest hotels, and ate greasy food at roadside diners. I remember sitting in the passenger seat, my legs swinging, listening to music while my dad talked about his dreams. Back then, I felt like his whole world. Life with my mom, Nadine, was softer but just as comforting. She worked as a school administrator and came home tired but present. We baked cookies together, played board games, and made up long, ridiculous stories with my dolls. Our evenings were full of laughter and warmth. I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt secure in a way children are supposed to feel. For a while, divorce didn't feel like a tragedy. It just felt like two homes. That illusion shattered when my father remarried. I was 7 years old when he introduced me to his new wife, Lydia. I remember standing in their living room, clutching my stuffed rabbit, studying her carefully. She was beautiful, polished, controlled, and confident. Her honey-brown hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, and her smile looked practiced, like something she'd learned to turn on and off. At first, Lydia was kind. She helped me with homework, asked about school, and even taught me how to braid my hair. I remember thinking that maybe I'd been lucky after all. Maybe I'd gotten the kind of stepmother other kids only talked about in movies. But that kindness didn't last. Lydia desperately wanted children of her own. And when pregnancy didn't happen, something inside her hardened. I didn't understand infertility at 7 years old. I didn't understand grief or resentment. All I understood was that the woman who once smiled at me now looked at me with irritation. Like my presence reminded her of something she'd lost. The shift was slow, almost invisible at first. When I came back from my mom's house, my dad and Lydia would be glowing, relaxed, tanned, full of stories about vacations they'd taken while I was gone. One afternoon, sitting at the kitchen counter, I finally asked, "Dad, why don't we go on trips together anymore?" He hesitated, glancing toward Lydia. "Well, sweetheart," he said carefully, "things are different now." Before I could say anything else, Lydia cut in. "Elena, adults need their own time too. You're old enough to understand that. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word stuck with me. I didn't know that wanting time with your father could be considered selfish. From that moment on, the rules started appearing, unspoken at first, then very clear. Go to your room. Adults are talking. Lower your voice. Stop laughing so loud. Sit still. Don't interrupt. Their house stopped feeling like my home. It felt like a place I was allowed to exist in, as long as I stayed quiet. I spent most of my time alone in my bedroom, listening to the sound of their conversations downstairs, wondering what I had done wrong. One afternoon, I laughed at a TV show in the living room. Lydia stormed in, her face tight with anger. "What did I say about noise?" she snapped. I don't care," she interrupted. "Follow my rules or go to your room." My father said nothing. He never did. When I tried to talk to him privately, he brushed it off. "She's adjusting," he'd say. "Give her time." But time didn't soften her. It empowered her. She criticized how I dressed, how I ate, how I sat. "Honestly, Elena," she'd sneer, "were you raised without manners?" I learned to make myself smaller. Every 2 weeks, when I returned to my mother's house, it felt like breathing after being underwater. But the dread of returning to my father's house always followed me. It sat in my stomach like a stone. By the time I was 12, I broke. After one particularly humiliating argument with Lydia, I went to my mom's room and told her everything. The years of rules, the insults, the silence, the loneliness. Nadine listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with every word. When I finished, she exploded. "That woman will not destroy my child," she said, already reaching for her phone. The argument between my parents that followed was brutal. Days later, back at my dad's house, he sat me down. "Elena," he said coldly, "your behavior is unacceptable. Lydia has been nothing but good to you." I stared at him, stunned. "Dad, she..." "Enough," he snapped. "Your mother is threatening court. Do you want to lose me?" Fear crushed my chest. "No." "Then stop complaining," he said. "You're tearing this family apart." That was the day I learned silence was safer than truth. From then on, I became perfect. Quiet. Obedient. Invisible. At my mother's house, life was different. She later married Marcus, a calm, kind man with a daughter named Talia. Marcus never tried to replace my father. He simply showed up. He listened. He cared. Talia became the sister I always wanted. As I grew older, the difference between my two homes became impossible to ignore. At my dad's house, I was a burden. At my mom's house, I was loved. When I became a teenager, my needs grew. Clothes. School supplies. A phone. At first, my dad helped, until Lydia took control. Suddenly, everything I received was secondhand. Clothes that didn't fit. Shoes already worn down. Meanwhile, Lydia's closet overflowed with designer labels. When I graduated high school, my dad promised me a small car. The night before we were supposed to shop, Lydia exploded. "Absolutely not," she yelled. "We can't afford that. I need a new car." The next morning, my dad avoided my eyes. "About the car." "It's okay," I said quietly. "I understand. It wasn't about the car. It was about the message. You were never the priority." College was no different. I got into my dream school. Lydia shut it down immediately. "Too expensive," she said. "She'll just waste it." I went to the school she chose. I survived. But something inside me broke quietly. And now, years later, sitting at my kitchen table with wedding invitations spread before me, I finally understand something I couldn't as a child. Some people don't deserve access to your happiness. And leaving her name off that invitation was the first time I chose myself. What I didn't know was that this decision was about to bring everything crashing back. By the time I left my father's house for college, I had mastered the art of emotional self-containment. I knew how to speak only when spoken to, how to swallow disappointment without showing it, and how to accept less without asking why. Lydia's house had trained me well. Silence was safety. Compliance was survival. College became my escape, even though it wasn't the school I had dreamed of. It was smaller, farther away, and cheaper. Exactly the kind of place Lydia had insisted would build character. I moved into my dorm with a single suitcase, a chipped laptop, and a quiet determination to prove that no matter how little faith anyone had in me, I would not fail. At school, I finally had space to breathe. No one told me to lower my voice. No one criticized how I ate. No one made me feel like I was in the way. I studied hard, worked part-time at the campus library, and kept mostly to myself. Making friends didn't come easily. Years of being treated like a burden had taught me not to take up space in other people's lives. Still, little by little, I started to feel human again. Whenever holidays came around, I split my time the way I always had, part with my mom and Marcus, part with my father and Lydia. But every visit to my father's house felt heavier than the last. Lydia no longer bothered hiding her disdain. She spoke to me through clenched teeth, corrected me in front of guests, and acted as if my presence disrupted the peace of her carefully controlled world. My father, Richard, remained willfully blind. The The breaking point came during winter break in my second year of college. My father called me one evening, and for the first time in years, sounded almost hopeful. "Lydia's birthday is coming up," he said. "She'd really like it if you came." I hesitated. The idea alone made my stomach tighten. But there was still a part of me, small, stubborn, foolish, that wanted to believe things could change. That maybe adulthood had softened her. That maybe time had done what honesty never could. So I said yes. I even went out of my way to buy her a gift. Not something expensive. I couldn't afford that, but thoughtful. A silk scarf in deep blue, the kind she liked to wear. I saved for weeks from my campus job to buy it. As I wrapped it carefully, I told myself this was my olive branch. My attempt at peace. The night of the party, their house was full of laughter and strangers. Lydia's friends filled the living room, glasses clinking, music playing softly in the background. I took a deep breath and walked in, gift in hand. "Happy birthday, Lydia," I said, forcing a smile. "I hope you like this." She looked at me like I'd insulted her. Her face twisted instantly, the mask slipping in front of everyone. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I froze. "Dad said." "Get out," she snapped. "You are not welcome here." The room went silent. My father stood a few feet away, staring at the floor. Lydia grabbed the gift from my hands, glanced at it with contempt, and tossed it into the trash. "I don't want anything from you," she said. "You don't belong here. Leave." My hands were shaking as I turned away. I didn't cry. Not there. I walked upstairs to my old room, grabbed the few things I still had there, and walked out of that house without looking back. Lydia's laughter floated through the air as I closed the door behind me, as if nothing had happened at all. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in that house. I went straight to my mom's place and broke down completely. Years of swallowed pain poured out of me. I told her everything. The manipulation, the favoritism, the humiliation, the way my father never once defended me. Nadine held me like she used to when I was little. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have protected you more." The next day, my phone rang. It was my father. "Why did you leave Lydia's party?" he demanded. "You upset her." I took a deep breath. She yelled at me in front of everyone. She threw my gift in the trash and kicked me out. There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. "I can't believe you'd lie about my wife like this. Call me when you're ready to apologize." That was the moment I truly understood. I hadn't just lost my childhood. I had lost my father. After that, our contact became minimal. Occasional texts. Rare coffee meetings in public places. He never invited me to his house again, and I never asked. Lydia had won. She always had. I focused on building a life that didn't revolve around pleasing people who didn't care whether I existed. I graduated college with honors, landed a job at a mid-sized marketing firm, and rented my first apartment. For the first time, everything in my life was mine, my space, my rules, my peace. That's where I met Caleb. He was quiet but observant, kind without being performative. He didn't interrupt me when I spoke. He didn't minimize my feelings. When I told him about my family, he didn't try to fix it. He just listened. For years passed faster than I expected. We moved in together, adopted a stubborn gray cat named Ash, and built a life that felt steady and real. Then one random Tuesday evening, while we were doing dishes, Caleb turned to me and asked me to marry him. I said yes through tears. Wedding planning brought joy and dread. Which brings me back to the invitations. After days of going back and forth, I made my decision. I sent an invitation to my father alone. Not Lydia. I couldn't invite the woman who had spent years erasing me from my own family. A week later, my phone rang. "How dare you?" my father shouted. "How could you disrespect Lydia like this?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Disrespect? After everything she's done to me." "She raised you," he snapped. "No," I said calmly. "She tolerated me. And you let her." For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I listed everything. The clothes. The car. College. The birthday party. The years of silence. The years of choosing her over me. Something shifted. His voice broke. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I failed you." I wanted to believe him. For a few weeks, he tried. He called. He apologized. He offered help with the wedding. Hope crept in despite my better judgment. Then the day before the wedding, he called again. "Lydia had a heart attack," he said coldly. "This is your fault." "I'm not coming." The line went dead. I stood there in shock, hope collapsing all over again. The next morning, I found out the truth. Lydia had faked it. And suddenly, everything became clear. Some people don't change. They just get better at manipulation. The truth about Lydia's so-called heart attack reached me quietly, not through drama or confrontation, but through an unexpected phone call that morning while I was getting ready for my wedding. I had just finished my makeup, my hands still slightly shaky, when my phone buzzed on the table. The name on the screen stopped me cold, Martha, one of Lydia's longtime friends from the neighborhood. I almost didn't answer. Part of me didn't want any more chaos on a day that already felt emotionally fragile. But something told me to pick up. "Elena," Martha said softly, skipping pleasantries. "I know I shouldn't be calling you, but you deserve to know the truth." My heart sank. Know what? There was a pause on the line, heavy and uncomfortable. Lydia didn't have a heart attack. She's fine. Perfectly fine. I overheard her bragging about it last night. She said she had to do something drastic to make sure your father wouldn't attend your wedding. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror. Hair done, dress hanging nearby, eyes suddenly distant. She lied. I whispered. "Yes," Martha said. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad things were until now." But I couldn't stay quiet. I thanked her and ended the call, my hands trembling as I lowered the phone. The room felt too quiet, too still. And yet, instead of the explosion of anger I expected, what washed over me was something else entirely. Clarity. This wasn't new behavior. This was who Lydia had always been, manipulative, calculated, and cruel when she didn't get her way. The only difference now was that I finally saw the pattern clearly, without excuses, without hope clouding my judgment. For a split second, I considered calling my father. I imagined laying out the truth, exposing her lie, forcing him to finally see what I had endured for most of my life. But then I stopped, because deep down, I already knew how that conversation would end. He would hesitate. He would doubt. He would choose her, just like he always had. So instead of picking up the phone, I set it down and took a deep breath. Today wasn't about Lydia, or my father, or the years I lost trying to earn love that was never freely given. Today was about the life I was choosing. A knock came at the door, pulling me back into the present. My mom stepped in, her eyes soft when she saw my face. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I am now." She smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Good. Because it's time." As I stepped into my dress, surrounded by my mom, Talia, and my bridesmaids, something inside me settled. The sadness was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't that scared little girl anymore, waiting for permission to matter. There was one more question lingering in the air, though, one that had been hovering since my father's call the night before. Who was going to walk me down the aisle? I hadn't said it out loud until now, but the absence felt heavy. My mom noticed immediately. "Elena," she said carefully, "have you thought about who you want beside you?" Before I could answer, Marcus, the man who had shown up for me when he didn't have to, cleared his throat. "I'd be honored," he said quietly, "but only if that's what you want." I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who had helped me with homework, taught me how to drive, cheered at my graduations, and never once made me feel like a burden. Tears filled my eyes. "I'd love that." His smile cracked, and he pulled me into a hug. "Then it's my privilege." The ceremony was beautiful. As the music began and I took Marcus's arm, I felt something I'd never felt walking beside my father: steadiness. Pride. Safety. The aisle felt long, but every step felt right. At the end stood Caleb, his eyes shining, his smile full of love. In that moment, everything else faded. The years of rejection. The hurt. The unanswered questions. All that mattered was the life ahead of us. The vows were spoken through tears and laughter. When we said, "I do," the room erupted in applause, and for the first time in my life, I felt surrounded by people who genuinely wanted me there. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and laughter filled the reception hall, I checked my phone briefly. Habit more than anything. There it was. A comment under one of the first photos someone had posted. From Lydia. Being walked down the aisle by a stranger while her own father wasn't even invited. Shameful. The familiar sting rose in my chest, but it didn't last. Caleb noticed my expression and leaned in. "Everything okay?" I looked at him, then back at the screen. Slowly, deliberately, I blocked her. Then I hesitated for a moment and blocked my father too. It wasn't done in anger. It was done in peace. Some chapters don't need closure. They just need an ending. Days later, as we packed for our honeymoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. There was no more waiting for apologies. No more hoping someone would finally choose me. I had chosen myself. Family, I learned, isn't about blood or titles. It's about who shows up, who protects your heart, who celebrates your joy without trying to control it. And as I closed my phone, stepping into a future built on love instead of obligation, I knew one thing for certain. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was freedom. Before this story ends, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. If this story touched you, know that you are not alone, and choosing your peace is always worth it.